They told us housing was a privilege. I say, shelter is a birthright.
With those words, President Ibrahim Traoré stepped into the dusty clearing of Ouagadougou's western district, surrounded not by cameras or armored vehicles, but by families, farmers, teachers, street vendors, children, all clutching one hope in common: a roof they could finally call their own. What followed was not a press conference. It was a revolution in cement, steel, and purpose. A line of bulldozers moved silently behind him, poised to clear the first stretch of land. But this was no foreign-funded development project. Every worker on site wore the same green and gold uniform marked Projet Soleil, the Sun Project, and every one of them was Burkinabè. Traoré wasn't unveiling a dream. He was breaking ground on it. "I am not here to talk," Traoré said, his voice firm. "I am here to deliver." He raised one hand and pointed to the horizon, where construction cranes creaked and trucks rumbled like thunder. 50,000 homes, free, for you, for your children, for the future of Burkina Faso. Silence, then screams, then tears. Women fell to their knees, men threw their hats into the air, teenagers recorded the moment on cracked phones. 4 years, they had heard promises, from France, from the IMF, from politicians who flew in with suits and left with suitcases. But this wasn't words, it was action, breaking ground in real time. Journalists rushed forward, stunned. One asked, "How will this be funded?" Another shouted, "Why now?" A third whispered, "Is this even possible?" Traoré didn't flinch. "You ask why now," he said, stepping closer to the microphone. "Because our people have slept on dirt floors for too long. You ask how it will be paid. With the money we used to send out of Africa, now staying home, where it belongs." Behind him, workers in yellow vests lifted steel beams into place. The first houses had already begun. But this wasn't just a housing project. It was a declaration of independence, not from colonial rule alone, but from the idea that Africa must wait for permission to dream. The first home was built in 19 days. It was small, just 3 rooms, a bathroom, and a modest kitchen. But to Ewa Ouedraogo, a widowed mother of 4 who had lived under a leaking tin roof for 8 years, it felt like a palace. On the day she received her key, she wept quietly and kissed the red iron doorframe 3 times before stepping inside. "I have never owned anything," she told the local press, gripping the brass-colored key in her hand like it was sacred. "Not even a bed. Now, I own a home." Ewa was the first of thousands. Each week, more families moved in: orphans, farmers, disabled veterans, grandmothers who had raised entire generations in clay huts. There was no waiting list for the rich, no bureaucracy for the well-connected. The only requirement: be Burkinabè and in need. President Traoré didn't just order construction, he supervised it. He visited sites unannounced, often at dawn, walking through the dust in boots, talking to masons and electricians like they were ministers. He asked if they were being paid fairly, if the materials were local, if the timelines were real. No shortcuts, he warned them. These aren't buildings, they are dignity in brick form. What made the project historic wasn't just its size, it was the way it was done. Every component was local. The bricks were made in Bobo Dioulasso, the roofing tiles in Kaya, the doors in Benfora. Instead of foreign contractors, young Burkinabè engineers and architects were hired by the thousands. Students from Ouagadougou University helped design eco-friendly water systems. Retired builders returned to train the next generation. It was a movement, not a mission. And the people responded with something that had been missing for years: belief. They painted murals on the walls of their new homes, women planting seeds, children raising flags, fathers carrying sacks of cement on their shoulders. The message was clear: we are building this together. In just 3 months, over 7,000 homes were completed. Streets were named after poets, elders, and fallen freedom fighters. Schools and clinics were built alongside the homes. Ewa's children now walked 5 minutes to their classroom instead of 2 hours. The transformation wasn't only physical, it was spiritual. People who had been invisible were now seen. Families that had been silent now sang. A country that had been divided by poverty now stood together, brick by brick. But not everyone was celebrating. As the homes rose, so did the whispers. Foreign diplomats grew nervous. Analysts in Paris and Washington called it a troubling precedent. Some claimed Traoré was nationalizing housing and interfering with free markets. A few even suggested the project was too good to be true, a PR stunt or unsustainable fantasy. But inside Burkina Faso, no one cared what the West thought. They had roofs, they had land, they had hope. Still, pressure mounted. International lenders, including the IMF, warned Traoré about the long-term risks of funding such projects without outside investment. They demanded audits, data, and slowdowns. Traoré responded with a televised address that would go viral across Africa. Standing at a housing site with dozens of construction workers behind him, their hands still covered in dust, he stared straight into the camera and said, "Let this be clear, Burkina Faso is not asking permission to care for its people. We will not wait for billionaires to approve our humanity. Every brick we lay is an act of independence. Every home we build is a rejection of poverty as destiny. The crowd behind him erupted in cheers. That night, the footage played on smartphones and radios from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. African youth saw something they hadn't seen in decades, a leader not only speaking for them, but building for them, literally. But then came the sabotage. Convoys carrying bricks were ambushed. Cement shipments disappeared mysteriously. A key contractor was bribed by a foreign firm and walked off the project. Western outlets began running headlines like, "Is Burkina Faso's housing dream collapsing?" Experts warn of overreach in Traoré's free home plan. The intention was clear: discredit the movement before it could succeed. But Burkina Faso had changed. When word spread of the attacks and delays, people didn't wait. Volunteers showed up to construction sites with their bare hands. Farmers donated clay. Truck drivers offered free transport. Even schoolchildren helped stack bricks after class. A young man was filmed hammering nails on a roof with one hand and holding a flag in the other. His t-shirt read, "Built by us, owned by us, protected by all." The footage went viral. Across West Africa, leaders began quietly studying the Traoré model. Niger announced its own pilot housing program. Guinea held emergency cabinet meetings. Senegalese opposition parties demanded their government follow suit. The pressure flipped. Now it was Western donors who began knocking, offering technical assistance, loans, and partnerships. But Traoré remained clear: we will work with friends, not masters. By the end of the first year, 50,000 homes stood strong. The project didn't just house the homeless. It sparked a revolution of dignity. Unemployment fell, local industries boomed, birth rates stabilized. Children who once slept on the ground now dreamed in beds of their own. Burkina Faso had become more than a country. It had become a symbol. And in a final ceremony in Ouagadougou, where the last key was handed to an 84-year-old grandmother who had spent her entire life in a tent, President Traoré stood before the people and declared, "We are not poor, we were looted, we are not weak, we were lied to, but now, brick by brick, we are rising, and no one will bury us in silence again." The crowd chanted his name, not in worship, but in gratitude. A drone camera rose above the city, capturing thousands of roofs, bright, red, glowing in the sun like the bloodline of a new Africa. The world watched, some in awe, others in fear. But the people of Burkina Faso, they smiled and kept building. If you like it, share it with someone who needs to see that hope is alive in Africa. Comment below what you'd do if your country launched a housing project like this. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of leadership, justice, and transformation across the continent. Africa is rising. Be part of the movement.